When I was in college, I signed up for a course called Introduction to Weightlifting. Now, I should prep this story with the background information that I was not the athletic kid. I was the nerdy kid. I was the bookworm. I was the one who knew the answers to trivia questions and would sit in a corner with a book by myself happily all night long. But my sister was in college with me. She really wanted to take this course, and I wanted to spend time with her. So I signed up for Introduction to Weightlifting. And the first day of the course came, and we showed up, and we did our workout, and I thought, this isn't too bad. Maybe I am the athletic kid after all. And then I went home, and I went to sleep, and I woke up the next morning, and I could not move. Every muscle in my entire body hurt. In fact, I was on the second bunk, the top bunk at that time in my dorm, and I rolled off the bunk and collapsed onto the floor because my legs were too weak to hold me up. And I cursed my sister, but I couldn't do anything about it because I couldn't actually physically get to her. It was the worst day of my entire college life. And then I kept going. And the soreness got better, and I got stronger. And then it got a little bit easier and a little bit easier. And then the more I went, I discovered these magical things called endorphins, and I started to feel good. And I started to realize that I could do more than I could have done before. And I started to feel better about what I could do. And all of a sudden, my life was starting to work better because I discovered this thing called physical health that I had just not really paid attention to before. It was there all along and had a body all along, but I just never really taken care of it. And when I started taking care of it, all of a sudden my life started to work better. Christianity offers us a proposition. The same way there is such a thing as physical health, and you have a body whether you like it or not, and you can either take care of it or not. Christianity offers us the proposition that there is such a thing called spiritual health. And you have a soul, whether you like it or not, and whether you know it or not. And you can either ignore it, or you can take care of it. For Christianity, taking care of ourselves spiritually, becoming spiritually healthy, is fundamentally loving God. We're in a short sermon series on the 3 tiers of the Westminster mission statement: love God, make friends, and serve others. And the first one, loving God, is all about becoming spiritually healthy as a person. And I will admit the analogy breaks down a little bit here. To become physically healthy, you have to become aware that you have a body and do things to take care of it. To become spiritually healthy, you have to become aware that you are not alone in the universe. You are not the center of the universe, but rather there is this other, this divine other that is calling you into relationship, and you have to enter into a loving relationship with God. And that relationship is what grows your soul into what it was meant to be. The scripture for this morning is from Deuteronomy, and it's one of the most famous scriptures. It's called the Shema. The Shema was repeated by faithful Jews every day for centuries. The Shema has been one of the most often prayed prayers of the people of God. And it says this: "Hear, O Israel, the Lord is your God, the Lord alone. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might. Keep these words that I am commanding you today in your heart. Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you are at home and when you are away, when you lie down and when you rise up. Tie them as a symbol on your wrist. Wear them as a sign on your forehead, and write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates." Now, when we drew the mission of Westminster out, we drew the language specifically from this passage because this encapsulates the essence of what it means to be in relationship, in loving relationship with God. And as in any relationship, if you're talking about actual love, about loving God, there are broadly speaking, two categories of things that go into love. Love is not simply a feeling. Feeling without action is sentimentality, and as any of you who are married know, sentimentality is cheap. If you have a loving feeling toward your spouse, but you never do anything for them, you're not going to have a very healthy marriage. If you have a loving feeling toward your spouse, but you never listen to them, talk to them, do things they like, go on dates together, clean the kitchen, do laundry, and all of that stuff, you're not going to have a very healthy marriage, because loving someone in actuality comes down into things you do and things you don't do. Loving God is the same way. When we talk about loving God, there is a whole category of things that we do because we love God and because it helps our relationship with God. This is why we talk about the importance of going to worship. This is why we talk about the importance of prayer. This is why we offer Bible studies. This is why we offer small groups. This is why we offer a whole host of things specifically designed to get you spending time with God, time talking to God, time being in the presence of God, because they are tangible ways you live out your love of God. And by living out your love of God, you become more of the spiritually healthy person you were meant to become. And so when you become a part of the family of faith here at Westminster, we're going to talk about the importance of worship and of prayer and of communion and of Bible study and of all of those things. The same way, if you were going to a marriage retreat, they would talk about the importance of communication and quality time and doing nice things for each other. It's the same concept, and it doesn't change because it's God. Bringing people into deep love with God is creating opportunities for them to do loving things with and for God. Okay, so that's the first category, things you do to be in love with God. And we all kind of get that. I didn't spend very much time on it because I feel like people wrap their minds around that pretty easily. The second category is things you don't do because you love God. And the analogy holds. When you get married, there are things you agree to not do anymore. And if you keep doing them, the marriage is not going to survive. The same thing happens in our relationship with God. If we want to maintain a spiritually healthy relationship with God, if we want to grow spiritually, then there are things that we have to stop doing. And this makes everyone nervous because nobody likes the word sin. And so if you don't like the word sin, I've got a dozen synonyms I can use for it. But the basic premise is still the same, that there are things, there are habits, there are tendencies that if you want to be a spiritually healthy person, you're going to have to give up. So imagine this scenario. Imagine you go to a personal trainer for the first time. And your personal trainer says, you know what you need to do? You need to go eat as many chocolate chip cookies that you can, drink an entire case of Dr. Pepper, and then sit on the couch and binge watch all the seasons of Game of Thrones. That's what you need to do. So at first you would be like, this is the most awesome personal trainer ever. And you would mock your friends who are out jogging and eating their kale and celery smoothies. And you would say, my personal trainer is better than yours because my personal trainer told me I could eat chocolate chip cookies and Dr. Pepper and sit on the couch all day. But if you kept doing it, if you really kept keeping that trainer's advice, you would notice a change in your body. Your body would stop being able to do things it used to be able to do. Your body would not work as well. You would feel more tired. You would feel more sluggish. You would feel less energetic. You wouldn't be as mentally sharp. You would probably start being a little bit depressed. And all of that would be because your body would stop working as well, because no matter what anyone tells you, eating sugar and sitting on the couch all day long makes your body stop working. It's not good for it. It doesn't matter what your personal trainer tells you. It doesn't matter what anyone's opinions are. That is simply the rule of how our bodies work. That is simply the rule of what happens when we put bad things into our bodies and when we do bad things with our bodies. Here's the thing. Everyone acknowledges that that is true with our bodies, and they seem to think it's different with our souls. They seem to think that we can put junk food into our souls and sit on the couch all day long and have no consequences whatsoever. And unfortunately, that is simply not true. It is simply not true. There are things that if you do them, the natural consequence of you doing them is that you become a person you don't want to be. This is the reason the church has had teachings for millennia on behaviors and habits that are toxic. Wrath, greed, envy, gluttony, lust, all of those big ticket sins that the church has talked about. It's not because God doesn't want us to have fun. It's because there is a truth built into the human soul that there are certain behaviors and certain habits that make us into people we don't want to be. And so, however you want to say it, if you want to call it sin, if you want to call it sickness, if you want to call it spiritual junk food, I don't care what we call it, but it's going to come down to this. If you want to grow in the spiritual life, if you want to become a spiritually healthy person who's in love with God, there are things you're going to have to give up. There are things you're going to have to stop doing. And you know what? If you really went, imagine my story that I just told, if you really took that personal trainer's advice, and you really saw what happened to you, and you really saw your body destroyed because of listening to his advice, you very well might one day go back to that trainer and say, "You lied to me. I went to you because I wanted to learn how to take care of my body, and what you told me destroyed my body. You lied to me." And friends, what I want to tell you today, as your pastor, as a pastor of Westminster United Methodist Church, is that I will not lie to you. I won't judge you, I won't shame you, because I stand before you as someone who loves chocolate chip cookies and Dr. Pepper, both the physical and the spiritual kind, but I will not lie to you. Because our mission is to help every single person who walks into these doors love the Lord their God with all their heart and all their soul and all their might, and by loving the Lord their God, grow into the people they were created to become. And my job in this role, standing before you, is to point the way through our scriptures, through the church's teachings, through the words of Jesus, to point the way toward the things we should do, the things we should not do, so that that happens better. Many of you know that I have a 1-year-old daughter at home. I was 34 when I gave birth, which those of you who are moms know that I slipped in right underneath the label geriatric pregnancy that starts when you are 35. And we'd waited a while, and part of it was just life. I didn't get married till I was 30, but part of the reason we waited a while was because my entire life, everyone had always told me how much work kids are. They would say, "You will never sleep again. Once you have a kid, you will never have a life again. Once you have a kid, you will never see your friends again. Once you have a kid, you will never do anything for yourself again. You will never go out to eat. You will never go out in general. You will never have a life." In fact, one friend I was talking to, I said, "So did having kids change your life?" They said, "Having kids destroyed our life." And, that's pretty intense. And so part of the putting it off till 34 was just life, but part of it was I wanted to be sure that I had all of my ducks in a row before we started crossing this bridge. And so I waited until I was financially secure. I waited until I was professionally secure. I waited until we had been married a year or two. And then I was like, okay, if we're going to do this, we got to do this because I am now 34. And so we did. And we were very lucky and having a very smooth delivery. And then this baby was put into my arms. And you know what I learned in the first 6 weeks? The first 6 weeks is when you don't really sleep at all. But what I learned in those first 6 weeks was that everything everyone had said was true. Like you don't sleep, you don't have a life anymore, you don't do things anymore. Like you don't do anything except for help this baby stay alive, right? Like you don't do anything except for that. In fact, I remember there was one time that we tried to make a stepping stone of her feet, and apparently she hated that because as soon as we put her foot in the mud, she started screaming bloody murder, and she did not stop screaming for the next 3 hours. Everything everyone had said was true. And you know what was also true? What was also true was this: it was the most amazingly beautiful experience of my entire life that I wouldn't have given back for the world. Everything. Even when she woke up 6 times in a night screaming, I was so in love with her, I almost couldn't bear it. That time that she screamed for 3 hours after putting her foot in the mud, I was just sitting there holding her, watching her scream, and thinking no one ever told me how much I would love this baby. And what I learned personally in that first 6 weeks is that it was harder than I ever thought it would be, and it was more worthwhile than anyone had ever told me it would be. Friends, what I want to say to you this morning is this: the Christian walk is harder than anyone will ever tell you it will be. Everything you've heard is true. If you walk with Jesus, if you really pursue loving God, becoming a spiritually healthy person, you will have to give up things you love. You will have to change habits you love. You will have to start doing things you might not like. You will have to become a different person. It will cost you everything. And that is absolutely true. And what is also true is this: it will be the most utterly worthwhile thing you ever do in your entire life. It will be the most utterly worthwhile thing you ever do in your entire life. And all of the cost is not only worth it, all of the cost will be overwhelmed in what you get from coming alive as a spiritually mature child of God who has finally found your soul. The mission of Westminster is to love God, make friends, and serve others. And this morning, I want you to consider with me what it means for what you are being called to do, to love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your strength, and with all your might.